Hi everybody, it's Andrea over at Sewspire.com. Today I'm going to show you how to make a jewelry wrap. It is sometimes called a jewelry roll or a jewelry case. It's designed for travel and it has large pockets here for your watches, necklaces, bracelets, and then several small pockets for your earrings. And it folds up. The wings just come in like that, and then it folds in thirds and attaches with a little button closure, which also this little closure will double as a hang tab, so you can hang that up when you get to your destination or when you're packing. The finished measurements on this piece are approximately 9 inches across, and then when it's folded up, it's about 4 inches, so 9 by 4, and when it is open, it measures 15 inches tall by 15 inches wide. So it's a nice size for travel. I think that you can certainly find other uses for this. I'm thinking notions and small crafting supplies and art supplies as well, but I did design it to be used as a jewelry roll. The whole project requires approximately 3/4 yard of fabric, but I did use 2 different weights of material. So if you could have at least a fat quarter of the twill and then a half of yard, maybe a little more of the cotton, quilt weight cotton or the print, that would be ideal. I also used an oversized button, which you can buy the kits at the craft store. If you don't have one of those buttons on hand, feel free to use a large button. Okay, so shall we get started? Okay, for this project you're going to need one oversized button that will cover with a coordinating fabric. And if you don't happen to have one of these button kits, which you can find at Walmart or any craft store, then you could just use a large button. You're going to need approximately a yard of fabric. I've used 2 different weights of fabric. You're going to start with, for the exterior, I chose a heavier cotton twill. You could certainly use quilt weight fabric, but I like the little heavier twill for the exterior. So to start, you're going to begin, and I pre-cut this, but this was originally a 16-inch by 16-inch square, which I folded in half, and then I notched out the top right-hand corner 3 1/4 inches in, and that's 3 3/4 inches in and 4 3/4 inches up. And that created these notches in the top right hand corner. And this is going to be the exterior of our jewelry roll, and I'll give you an idea of how this is going to function when it's finished. The side flaps will come in and it will fold in thirds, and then there'll be a little tab here that you can hang it up, and also will double as a closure, and you'll wrap that around and secure it with a button tab. So we're going to need to cut out 2 of these 16-inch by 16-inch squares and then notch out your corners. The interior of mine, this is the second square, is this fun Anna Maria Horner chocolate lollipop print, which is really very old. Gosh, I think she might have released this collection 8-10 years ago, and I had a little left in the scrap pile, so it coordinates nicely with the pretty aqua twill, so I selected that. So originally this was a 16 by 16-inch square, and I notched out the top corners there. Then you're going to cut a long strip 4-inch strip by 22 inches long. Actually, it would be 44 inches. I say 22 because it was cut from a yard of 22-inch wide fabric, and it's a full 4-inch strip. So the total length is approximately 44 by 4 inches. And with this piece, these are going to become our little pockets. What I've done is just press over the top and the bottom lip of the entire strand approximately 1/2 inch. So then this piece with the folded edges measures 2 3/4 of an inch. You can see how I've done that. And what I'm going to do is measure and cut pockets, little slip pockets for the jewelry. So I'm going to cut 3 of them that are approximately 9 inches across. And then I'm going to cut 6 of them that are approximately 3 inches across. And I've pre-cut those little pockets here. Let me fold this up and show you. I've pre-cut them on this one here. So here's the exterior square. And then here is my inner panel, and these little pockets are pre-cut on there. And then what I've done is I've taken and then gone back over to the ironing board and pressed in the sides. So after you've cut them, it's a lot easier to just fold over those edges and press them, as opposed to having to press all 4 edges. So initially, when you have your long strip, press the top and the bottom, and then after you've cut them into their individual pockets, you can press all the way around. So I have here, and now I'm wishing that I would have done these pockets in a contrasting color so you could really see them. I have 3 of these long pockets, which when I originally cut them, they were 9 inches long, and now with their folded edges, they're approximately 8 inches long. And they'll fit beautifully inside down that center row. And if you like, I think it's really easy to pre-press this square, you know, with the notches cut out of the top, so that you can create that same kind of guide that I have. So you would press over your flaps and then fold it in thirds, and then fold the flap down and press it one more time, because then you have these nice guides for your pocket. So I have pre-cut and pre-pressed all of my little pockets. We have 6 little ones and 3 big ones. I'm just going to go over to the machine and stitch across the top of each pocket to hold down that fold. And if you were really fancy and wanted to make a super nice jewelry holder, you could take some felt, a little felt piece the same size, and put that on the reverse so that when you pressed it, the interior of these were lined. So for now, I am going to just stick with the cotton fabric, and I'm going to stitch across the top of all of my pockets. initially I had planned for this to be the interior, but like I said, I really want you to be able to see these pockets. So I'm going to swap this interior out for you and use what I plan to be the exterior for the interior so you can see how to position these. So this side of this, it's a brush twill, and this side is a little coarser and this side is nice and soft. So I'm going to make this my interior, and I'm just going to take all my little pockets and position those in their quadrants. I'll put a pin in them, and once I get everything in place, then I'm just going to stitch down and across the bottom and up to attach. So I'm happy with the pocket positioning. Looks pretty good. Everything looks pretty even. I'll just do a little tester fold to make sure. That'll work out well. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the pockets. You'll want to reinforce with a back stitch at the beginning and the end, and you're just going to start to the side, go across the bottom, and come back up. And with this machine, I have a needle down function, so I can just pivot with the needle down. If you don't have that, just use your hand wheel and move your needle down. Alright, I have all of the pockets attached, and I have a lot of threads to trim up, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, much cleaner, and now you can see that the pockets are all attached. If you want right now, depending upon your needs, you can divide these larger pockets. I'm going to use the larger pockets for necklaces, my watch, and bracelets, and the small pockets for earrings. So I want to leave them full length there, but you certainly could divide them and make those smaller. The next step is to create our little hang tab and closure strap. And that was made with a 3" by 10" piece of fabric. I used the cotton quilt weight fabric for that. And like all of my straps, I fold it in half and press it. Then I open that up and fold the outer edges in to meet on that center press line. And then I fold the finished edges over to create the strap. And when that is folded, it measures 3/4 of an inch wide by 10 inches long, and you're just going to need to stitch down that open edge of the strap. that to make a little U, and you'll want a little over an inch hanging out at the top there, over that top edge. And you're just going to tack that down with a straight stitch very close to the top. Now we are ready for that second square with the notched out corners, and that is going to be positioned. Oops, this one had my other tabbing on it, and then that was going to be the outside, so let me take that off. Then you just position your exterior right on top of this interior pocket panel. Line everything up. You might have to squish the strap down a little bit where it's popping up so it sits flat. Put some pins in there. Now we're going to need to use a very narrow seam allowance because you don't want to stitch on top of your pockets. So we're talking like a 1/4 inch or less. You just want to make sure that you're capturing the interior and the exterior and avoid those pockets. And what we need to do is start at the top here and stitch all the way down and around, across the bottom, back up, in, and to the top. We're going to leave this top part open so we can flip it right side out. You will want to reinforce with a back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alright, I've stitched all the way around, and now I'm going to take out the pins and turn that right side out, and then I'm going to head over to the iron and press that nice and flat. Poking out those corners. And I'm going to go iron this and I'll be right back. I'm back with my nice pressed piece. Everything came together as I'd hoped. What I did when I was over at the ironing board is fold this edge, which we left open, to turn it inward approximately a 1/2 inch, and that tail from the hang tab just tucks right in there nice and neat. And then the next step is to top stitch this top edge closed and reinforce the hang tab. And then I'm going to go ahead and go all the way around the outer edge. So let's do that. All right, I've top stitched all the way around. And the very last step is to create the fabric covered button and sew that on. So I want to get an approximate location for that button. And it's going to wrap around the edge. And remember that your jewelry is going to expand, of course. So I would suggest position it more towards the top. So I'm just going to put a pin in there where I want to attach the button. And then to create the button, you're going to need a very small piece of fabric and the two pieces of the button. And in the button kit, there is a little assembly mechanism which you'll also need to have. And what I do is position the button over something that I want accented, like this pretty aqua flower. And you just push that right into that tray. And then the fabric, all the extra fabric is up like that. You have to trim that away. And you're leaving about a ½ inch of fabric popped out because that's going to tuck inside of the button. You just push it down. And then you position with the shank up the cover, and that sits in there. And I can usually just push it in with my thumbs. You can use a small hammer if you need. You'll hear it pop. And then you have a really pretty fabric covered button that just needs to be attached to the outside. And that's going to be really cute. I like to use button craft thread to attach my buttons. It's stronger and you don't have to sew around that little shank more than once or twice. And I did notice that they had the button craft thread at the Michaels craft store. You can, of course, order it online as well. So I just go through one layer there, and pull that through. It's double threaded, and then come through the back of the button, and come up one more time, trying to get in the same spot. And I can remove my pin, and then I'm just going to pull on both edges. And that should be secure, and then I would double knot it and pull it nice and tight against that shank. And if you want, you can even come on the other side and double knot it there. But this thread is really strong. And I trim the extras. And my jewelry organizer is finished. So cute. Oh, I love it. I'm excited to use it. So the way it will work is you'll be able to hang this up like on the doorknob or on, if there's a hook on the door, and then you'll put your jewelry inside. This Apple Watch, the bands come off, when I was at my destination, I think I would actually display the earrings on the outside so I knew what was in each pocket. And then I have some longer necklaces that I'm going to put in those pockets as well. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me and sewing with me today. This was an original design that just popped into my brain. So it's the first time that I've ever made it, but I'm super pleased. If you have ideas as to how we can improve the design, please share. I love to hear what other people are doing with these patterns, and I hope you'll share the blog and your talents with your friends and family. Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure. I'll be back next week with another surprise sewing project.